What happens when you fall in love with your own reflection? Before there was an adversary, there was an archangel of unimaginable splendor. His rebellion didn't begin with hatred. It started with a quiet, intoxicating admiration for his own perfection. A single thought: if I reflect his glory so perfectly, am I not as glorious as he is? This is the story of how God's most beloved creation became his greatest enemy. A chilling account of how the brightest light casts the deepest shadow, and how a divine gift, when it is worshipped, becomes a curse. Imagine a time, before the first star ignited, before the earth knew its form. Heaven existed then, not as some distant realm, but as a boundless expanse of pure, unadulterated harmony. Every light, every song, every breath of creation was a perfect note in an eternal symphony. Divine order reigned supreme, a cosmic dance of absolute concord. In such a place, it was impossible to conceive that imperfection could even exist. In this celestial choir, one voice shone brightest. His name was Lucifer. You might know him as an adversary, but once he was the morning star, a cherub of unimaginable splendor. Beautiful beyond description, wise beyond comprehension, radiant with a glory that didn't just reflect, but was the very light of God. As Ezekiel 28:13-15 describes, he was adorned with every precious stone, blameless in his ways from the day he was created. Think of a flawless sapphire radiating inner fire, or an emerald catching every shimmer of divine light. This was Lucifer, a being so magnificent he seemed to embody heaven's perfection. He was the guardian of divine mysteries, a trusted confidant, beloved by the Creator himself, a testament to God's perfect design. When he moved, heaven itself seemed to hold its breath, every angelic chorus momentarily pausing to acknowledge his brilliance. It seemed impossible that such absolute perfection could ever be undone. The prophet Isaiah, much later, would hint at this grandeur, referring to him as day star, son of dawn, Isaiah 14:12, highlighting his preeminent position. He was not merely an angel among many, he was the zenith of angelic creation, closest to the heart of the Almighty. But even in this perfect light, an unseen shadow was beginning to stir. It was there, in the boundless expanse of celestial light, that God spoke. Not with thunder or a voice that shook the foundations of creation, but with a whisper, intimate and resonant, that echoed directly in Lucifer's spirit. "Lucifer," the voice began, "as gentle as eternity itself, yet carrying the weight of absolute truth. You are the light-bearer, the reflection of my glory. Through you, heaven shall see my splendor, and the host shall know my wisdom." Imagine that moment, the most radiant being in all creation, bathed in the direct presence of his Maker, an intimate confession of purpose and profound trust. Lucifer, ablaze with shimmering wonder, bowed low before the throne of light. His presence was so pure, so perfectly aligned, that he seemed to drink in every word. Yet the divine voice continued, a loving caveat woven into the fabric of creation itself. "Yet remember this," God cautioned, his tone unwavering. "The light that burns within you is not your own. You are a vessel, not the source." At this, heaven itself seemed to hold its breath. A profound silence fell, a subtle ripple across the cosmic harmony. Even the seraphim paused in their endless worship, their countless eyes fixed on the interaction between Creator and creation. That stillness communicated a gravity they had never before felt. Lucifer, his pure crystal voice unwavering, responded, "My Lord, all that I am I owe to you. My light is yours. My song is yours." It was a perfect answer, seemingly. Yet his heart was not truly in full submission, as a new, unsettling thought was taking root. Lucifer, having uttered his seemingly pure declaration, stood radiant. Yet a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his being. not a physical tremor, but a nascent stirring deep within his spirit. A thought, or perhaps a question, began to take form, a dangerous whisper in the hallowed silence. If I reflect his glory so perfectly, then am I not as glorious as he is? It wasn't hatred, not anger, not yet. It was a sweet, intoxicating wonder at his own perfection, a self-admiration masked by devotion. God, who sees beyond all thought, felt that whisper take root. He didn't strike Lucifer down. He didn't command fear. Instead, he spoke with infinite love, a final, poignant warning that would echo through eternity. "Lucifer," said the Almighty, his voice as soft as eternity, yet firm as the bedrock of creation. "You stand closest to my light. But beware, for the nearer one stands to light, the deeper their shadow grows. Should your heart ever claim what is mine, your light will turn against you. The brightness that lifts will become the fire that consumes." A profound truth. Think of a man staring too long at his own reflection in a flawless mirror. Does he see just himself, or a glorified version, separate from reality? Lucifer listened, but he could not understand. To him, pride did not yet exist as rebellion, but as the innocent awe of his own perfect radiance. This seemingly innocent wonder was beginning to subtly corrupt his magnificent light. In the ages that followed this profound yet subtle encounter, God set about the grandest of endeavors, the creation of the universe. Stars ignited in cosmic firestorms, painting galaxies across the infinite canvas. Time began its relentless march, marking epochs and ages. Amidst this breathtaking display of divine power, Lucifer's light seemed to grow brighter still. He was, to all of heaven, the master of ceremonies for creation's unfolding grandeur. He orchestrated the celestial choirs, bringing forth harmonies that resonated through newly formed nebulae. He was trusted with profound knowledge, an intimate understanding of the Creator's blueprints. Legions of angels looked to him for command, for guidance. He was the very voice of heaven's beauty. Yet, with every note he sang, a new desire, subtle and quiet at first, began to form within him. It was not hatred. It was not anger. It was a yearning to be more than a reflection, a longing to be recognized, not just as a magnificent vessel, but as a creator in his own right, to have his own light worshipped. During the thunderous songs of worship, as multitudes bowed before God's throne, Lucifer began to feel a strange sweetness when angels' eyes turned toward him in admiration. Their adoration burned hotter than the sun. You can almost feel a prickle of unease, knowing where this path might lead. If his light grew brighter, then why did an inner tension begin to mount, threatening heaven's perfect melody? Then came a day when Lucifer stood once again before the throne. This time heaven felt different. It was heavy, quiet, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath, anticipating a revelation or perhaps a confrontation. The air, usually vibrant with praise, was thick with an unspoken tension. God looked upon Lucifer and again spoke words that carried both boundless love and profound sorrow. "Lucifer," said the voice that shapes all creation, filled with an ancient, knowing ache, "you were the first to behold my glory, the brightest of all my works. Yet I see in you the spark of a storm." It was an active lament, a divine warning. Can you imagine the Creator facing his most beloved creation, seeing the path of destruction already laid out? The caution was explicit, a direct challenge to the burgeoning self-worship. Do not let your heart be deceived by its own reflection. You are loved beyond measure, but you are not me. Lucifer's expression remained outwardly calm, serene even, But within, that insidious whisper, once subtle, now returned with a compelling force, gaining traction in his heart. Why should I not be more? Why should I bow forever when I was made to shine? But he did not speak it, not yet. His silence, however, was deafening. But then a new decree would push Lucifer's simmering pride to its breaking point, the creation of humanity. And God, in his infinite mercy and wisdom, spoke once more, not as a ruler demanding obeisance, but as a father revealing a profound truth. He unveiled a new blueprint for creation. There will come a time, he said, his voice resonating through the silent heavens, when I shall create beings in my image, lesser than angels, yet destined to bear my spirit. Imagine the surprise, the subtle shift as this news rippled through the angelic hosts. These new creatures, humans, would walk not in the timeless perfection of heaven, but in worlds of matter and time. And through them, God's boundless love would be revealed in a way the angels, in their perfect, unchallenged existence, could not fully comprehend. For Lucifer, the command was direct, a profound test of humility. You, Lucifer, must guide them, not rule them. You must serve, not demand. This was the ultimate challenge for a being who had begun to crave adoration. The thought was unbearable. He was to guide them, to serve them, to be a guardian for creatures made of dust, molded from the very ground beneath their feet. To his burgeoning pride, the idea was an insult. It was a theological test of humility, a choice presented with stark clarity. He bowed, his magnificent form still, but his silence echoed with an unvoiced rebellion, a refusal his lips could not bring themselves to utter. How could he, the glorious morning star, humble himself before mere mortals, or would this challenge unleash the storm? God saw all, and with a voice that shook the very foundations of heaven, not in anger, but in profound truth, he declared, "The greatest glory is not in ruling, but in obeying." This was the ultimate principle of divine order, a truth Lucifer had once embodied. He continued, delivering a spiritual and psychological anatomy of pride itself. Remember, my son, pride was never born of light, but of the shadow that forgets where the light came from. It was a piercing truth, a surgical incision into the very heart of Lucifer's conflict. Imagine the internal turmoil, the absolute brilliance he possessed, his very being woven from light, now confronted with the revelation that this inner stir, this yearning for self-exaltation, was a shadow. His heart was torn. It was a brutal battle between the light he carried and the will that yearned to claim it as his own, between selfless devotion and burgeoning self-assertion. He had been offered a choice, obedience born of love, or the perilous path of self-exaltation. Lucifer, illuminated by the truth, yet blinded by his own burgeoning desire, did not reply. The words hung heavy in the air, a final plea unanswered. As he turned away from the throne, the symphony of heaven resumed its eternal song. But within him, something fundamental had irrevocably shifted. A tear in the fabric of his perfect being, a change sown deep within his spirit that would begin to unravel the cosmic harmony. Lucifer's withdrawal was not one of repentance, but of contemplation. The words of God, meant to pierce, instead created a chasm. Deep within him, something fundamental had changed forever. The seeds of rebellion, once mere whispers, were now rooting themselves silently. So Lucifer withdrew. He sought solitude, high upon the highest clouds of heaven, where golden light met the endless horizon. His wings, once agents of praise, now shimmered with a restless fire. The peace he once knew was fading. Inside, questions burned, insistent and self-justifying. Why must I always bow? Why must every song end with his name, not mine? He looked at his own reflection, flawless and radiant, in the rivers of light that cascaded beneath heaven's gates. Was there any creation more magnificent than himself? He watched as Gabriel's voice rose in devotion, as Michael's strength gleamed with humility. Every other angel gave glory not to themselves, but to the Creator. To Lucifer, however, it began to feel like a chain, a constant reminder of his own perceived subjugation. He stopped singing the hymns of praise. He stopped joining the great gatherings before the throne itself. The other angels noticed, but who would dare question the most beautiful of God's creations? In the splendid solitude of his palace of light, Lucifer began to create music unlike anything heaven had ever heard. It was not of worship, but of self. Notes that praised beauty, intellect, and freedom. The sound was haunting, mesmerizing, and dangerous. His unique melodies began to draw attention. Who would be swayed by this intoxicating new sound? The sound was unlike anything heaven had heard before. It was haunting, mesmerizing, and undeniably dangerous. Some angels, drawn by the strange new melody, came from afar, their luminous forms subtly drawn to its allure. They felt a new kind of power in it, a stirring in their hearts they had never known, a tantalizing whisper suggesting more than just worship. Lucifer, his eternal beauty now tinged with a knowing smile, looked upon these enraptured angels. "Do you not feel it?" he asked softly, his voice a silken thread weaving through their spirits. "The beauty of what we are. We who move the stars, who carry the light itself. Are we not worthy of more than endless servitude?" The angels hesitated. His words were graceful, his tone sincere. There was no open rebellion yet, no outright defiance, only questions. Questions that, in the context of his intoxicating music, began to make a dangerous kind of sense. And thus the whisper spread, subtle yet pervasive, like a shadow at sunset. Lucifer's influence grew, presented not as rebellion, but as freedom, not as hatred, but as enlightenment. He called it an awakening. Meanwhile, before the throne of light, God watched. He did not strike. He did not silence. For even in heaven, the profound gift of free will had meaning. The stage was set, but a final cosmic decree from God would ignite the irreversible separation. Then came a day when all of heaven was summoned. The throne blazed with a light that seemed to pulse with profound purpose, and the voice of the Almighty filled every realm, every celestial corridor. It was a decree, not just for the angels, but for the very fabric of existence itself. "Creation shall begin," God declared, his words echoing with the promise of new life. "A world shall rise from the void. Its skies, its seas, its living souls will bear my breath." And with this, a new gift was announced: choice. The same sacred, perilous freedom bestowed upon the angels would now be given to these new beings. The purpose, profoundly simple yet utterly revolutionary: "And through their love, my glory will be complete." The angels, in their pure devotion, bowed and rejoiced. Imagine the myriad voices of praise, the waves of adoration for this new plan. All except one. Lucifer stood utterly still. His eyes, usually pools of serene light, burned now with something new, something chilling: resentment. He heard the cheers, saw the obeisance, and felt a bitter rage within. Later, in the quiet of his dwelling, his wings trembling not from awe, but from consuming ire, he whispered, "They will love him, but they will never see him. They will worship him through faith, while I have seen his face. I have heard his voice, and still I must bow." The declaration of humanity's creation became the catalyst for Lucifer's ultimate defiance. He turned toward the gates of heaven and looked out into the vast, empty void where earth would one day exist. A chilling calm settled upon him as he made his final, heartbreaking internal decision. "If love is his greatest law," he whispered, the sound a mere breath in the cosmic expanse. Then perhaps I can love myself enough to be free. This was the ultimate covenant of self, a choice to abandon divine love for the intoxicating allure of his own will. That night the stars themselves seemed to dim, their brilliance momentarily eclipsed by the burgeoning shadow of this decision. In the deepest, most secluded chambers of heaven, Lucifer gathered the angels who had begun to follow him. They were drawn not by a message of overt rebellion, but by admiration of his beauty, his wisdom, his passionate arguments. "My brothers," he said, his voice calm, soothing, yet laced with a subtle venom, "we have served without question. We have sung his praises since before time began. But now he makes creatures of dust and calls them his children. Are we not more divine? Should we not share in his throne?" The angels murmured among themselves. Some bowed their heads in confusion, their hearts still flickering with unease. Others, however, nodded, their eyes reflecting Lucifer's light, already beginning to distort. As Lucifer seduced his followers with promises of shared glory, the core of his being began to warp. He stepped forward, his wings unfurling like an encroaching storm. "I do not seek to replace him," he declared. "I only seek to rise, to claim what we have earned. If I carry his light, then why must I live in his shadow?" The words were honeyed poison, a seductive invitation to self-worship. In that moment, a profound and horrifying shift occurred. The warmth of God's presence, which had once filled every fiber of Lucifer's being, began to fade. His light, once pure and radiant, flickered, distorted, no longer drawing from the divine source, but from within. A strange, intoxicating strength began to bloom, whispering, "You need no master." And in that agonizing silence, God spoke. Not aloud, not with thunder or flame, but directly into Lucifer's spirit, as intimate as their first conversation. "Lucifer," the voice resonated, layered with ancient sorrow. "You have begun to love the reflection more than the source. You have made yourself your own God. Do you not see what you are becoming?" Lucifer looked towards the throne, tears of light, shimmering and cold, forming in his eyes. "I only want what is fair," he pleaded, a last, desperate justification. "I only want to be free." And God, in his infinite love, offered a final, heartbreaking plea. "Freedom without love is pride, and pride without truth is death. I gave you light to share, not to worship. I made you to serve, not to rule. Turn back before your beauty becomes your curse." But Lucifer could not. The voice of his own pride had grown louder, more insistent than the very voice of his Creator. With God's presence withdrawn, the harmony of heaven shattered, paving the way for the inevitable confrontation. Lucifer fell to his knees in the wake of God's withdrawal, trembling not in repentance, but in the raw force of what he had chosen. The first tears of heaven, not born of pain but of defiance, struck the golden floor of eternity, sending a faint tremor through the very core of creation. The harmony, once flawless, now carried an undeniable sound of discord. He rose slowly, his form radiating a dark resolve. His wings, once instruments of praise, spread wide, no longer reflecting heaven's light, but burning with his own fierce internal fire. "Then let it be so," he whispered, a pronouncement that tore through the celestial peace. "If I cannot rise by his will, I will rise by mine." The stars, those countless pinpricks of divine creation, flickered. The light of heaven, a constant beacon, trembled. The entire celestial realm seemed to hold its breath, sensing the cataclysm that was about to unfold. Around him, drawn by the power of his conviction, gathered the angels who had been swayed by his seductive music. Their loyalty, however misguided, was fierce, born of admiration for his charisma and perceived strength. His rallying cry cut through the tension. "Brothers, we were born from light, not chains. Why must heaven belong to one alone? The Almighty has given us strength, yet denies us the throne. If we were made in his image, then are we not worthy to rule beside him? The serene heavens were now a stage for cosmic conflict. A challenger would soon rise to defend the throne. The quiet murmurs within Lucifer's newly formed assembly were suddenly shattered. The heavens themselves split with an unyielding light, a pure, divine brilliance that announced an opposing force. Michael descended, his armor shining like molten gold, his very presence radiating unwavering loyalty to the throne. His expression, however, was not one of fury but sorrow, a deep, ancient grief for what was being lost. Behind him stood legions of angels, their wings radiant with purity, their eyes fixed on their commander. Lucifer, Michael's voice rang out, firm and resonant, yet tinged with a plea. You stand upon sacred ground and speak words that do not belong to heaven. Stop this before it destroys you. It was a desperate warning, an attempt to pull his brother back from the precipice. But Lucifer, with a faint, chilling smile that lacked any true joy, simply retorted, Destroys me? No, brother, it will free me. You serve without question, you bow without thought, but I see what you cannot, a truth that even God fears. What truth could be so profound, so devastating, that even the Almighty would fear it? There is no truth outside his will, Michael replied, his voice a shield against the deception. Lucifer stepped closer, his gaze burning with a fierce, self-proclaimed wisdom. Then his will is a cage, he declared. For a long, agonizing moment, the two brothers faced each other. Light against light, purpose against pride. The profound tension hung heavy, a palpable force, as all of heaven fell silent, waiting for what would come next. In this moment of ultimate division, God's voice would resonate one last time before war erupted. As Michael stood poised, the very air vibrating with tension, a voice, rich with ancient sorrow, filled all of heaven. Not a voice of wrath, but of heartbreak, a profound lament for what was being lost. You were perfect in beauty, Lucifer, God's voice echoed, quoting from the ancient prophecies, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty, until iniquity was found in you. He paused, the silence heavy with the weight of unchosen paths. Why, God asked, his voice a tender appeal directed solely at Lucifer, do you turn against me, your Creator, your Father? Lucifer, his blazing eyes fixed on the distant shimmering throne, finally spoke. His voice, once a fountain of pure song, now carried a harsh metallic edge. I call it freedom. The words hung, defiant in the celestial air. And then, for the first time, perhaps in all of eternity, God wept. Not human tears, but a cosmic sorrow, a silent shimmering that seemed to dim the very stars. You cannot create light from pride, my son, the divine voice resonated, aching with love and grief. You can only steal it. You cannot build on self-love. You can only destroy. It was a final, wrenching offer of repentance, a last chance to reclaim the purest version of himself. But Lucifer, in his ultimate act of self-will, hurled back his final damning declaration. I would rather burn as my own flame than live forever as your reflection. The words were a rupture, a tearing of the fabric of creation. With this final, agonizing exchange, the choice was made, and the consequence was irreversible. The echo of Lucifer's defiant words resonated through eternity, a stark declaration of separation. Then a final voice filled heaven, not with a roar of anger, but with unwavering resolve, a sacred ordinance that sealed a destiny. If you will not serve, then you cannot remain. It was God himself, his voice imbued with both love and an inescapable finality. He decreed that the throne Lucifer coveted would remain empty, not for lack of a worthy occupant, but for the inherent impossibility of two wills on one throne. His light, once borrowed, would now consume him from within, turning to a destructive fire. And his name, once Morning Star, would be forever changed to Accuser. The weight of this transformation was cosmic, from the most glorious reflection of God to his greatest adversary. Lucifer, in turn, embraced his fury. His magnificent wings, once shimmering with precious stones, now unfurled, sharp and dark, radiating a heat that was not from God. His followers, a trembling multitude, mirrored his defiant stance, ready for the battle ahead, their once bright forms now shadowed by his corrupted light. "Brother," Michael's voice, thick with grief, cut through the tension, a last desperate plea. "This cannot end in victory. You fight against the very source of your being." But Michael's words were lost in the rising tide of ambition and self-worship. The final word was spoken, and the war for heaven began. And so it began. The heavens, once a canvas of serene, harmonious light, erupted into a storm of radiance and shadow. This was no clash of armies with physical swords and shields, but a cosmic war of wills, of light against light, of loyalty against ambition. Stars, caught in the spiritual crossfire, flickered and shattered. Realms of pure energy trembled. The very chorus of angels, who had known only joy, now wept, their lament a mournful echo across the celestial plains. High above the chaos, the Creator watched. This was not vengeance on display, but a father's heartbreak. For God, in his infinite love, could not destroy what he had once cherished, not without first allowing the full, terrible consequence of free will to unfold. Lucifer, now truly the accuser, blazed with a terrifying beauty. His form, once the pinnacle of divine artistry, was now a vortex of corrupted brilliance, and his strength seemed to surge with the power of his defiance. He led his forces, a third of the starry host, their faces contorted with a feverish fervor to match his. They believed they were fighting for freedom, but they were now slaves to a new master of pride. His rebellion was a fearsome, intoxicating display of power, a defiance that seemed, in its own warped way, to defy even the eternal. How could God's love hope to prevail against such a brilliant, terrifying force? Lucifer, now consumed by the very fire he had kindled, seemed to command the entire battlefield. His light, once glorious, now burned with a terrifying, destructive intensity, twisting and tearing at the fabric of the celestial realm. He unleashed torrents of corrupted energy, roaring defiance against the very heavens that had birthed him. But then, amidst the chaos, a new sound began to rise. It started as a faint hum, a resonance born from a trillion loyal hearts, growing into a unified, unyielding chorus. Michael's army, a symphony of pure light, rose as one. One heart, one voice, one purpose. And their cry, shaking the very foundations of the universe, soared. Mi-Ka-El, who is like God? The name itself, a question and a declaration, struck Lucifer like a physical blow. His terrifying fire faltered. His light, once outwardly expansive, began to collapse inward, consuming him in agony. His self-proclaimed glory turned into a searing pain, a prison of his own making. Michael, empowered by the unified truth, moved with the swiftness of divine justice. His blow was not one of hatred, but of inevitability, a necessary severance. Lucifer shrieked, a sound of agony and rage that ripped through the cosmic silence. He plunged through eternity, a falling star, his once magnificent form twisting, darkening, becoming a terrifying shadow against the infinite backdrop of space. As Lucifer plummeted into the abyss, God's final, mournful words echoed into the darkness. He plunged through the empty abyss, his screams ripping through the cosmic silence. As Michael's final blow sent the once brilliant morning star spiraling into the eternal void, a voice, calm and infinite, yet filled with an unbearable sorrow, followed him into the darkness. It was God, his words not spoken in wrath, but as a mournful echo of truth, a final lament for his beloved creation. "You were the most radiant of my design, Lucifer," the divine voice resonated, reaching into the deepest corners of the abyss. "I gave you light, but you chose fire. I gave you freedom, but you chose pride." The words were a stark, irreversible judgment, yet beneath them thrummed an undeniable undercurrent of sorrow. "My love does not fade, not even in this abyss," God continued, his voice a beacon of persistent love in the encroaching darkness. "I will never cease to see you as the one who once carried my light." Even in condemnation, there was a relentless, eternal love that refused to be extinguished. It was a love that grieved for what could have been, for the path rejected, for the glory that had turned to ashes. These words, a final, heartbreaking testament, followed the falling star, a promise that even in the deepest darkness, the memory of light would persist. He descended, a blazing ruin, through the endless void. He fell until a new bottom was formed from his very descent, a realm of perpetual shadow and burning torment. He opened his eyes, no longer shimmering with celestial light, but glowing with an infernal red glare. His once glorious wings, now charred and broken, were black as pitch, and his voice, once a melody of praise, was twisted with unspeakable rage and a chilling resolve. "Then I will build my own throne," he hissed, the words solidifying into dark matter around him, "and I will make the darkness my kingdom." As this declaration solidified, the ground beneath his feet cracked and burned, forming a jagged, desolate landscape. And from the scattered remnants of heaven's light, the other fallen angels, bruised and broken but equally defiant, began to gather around him. They gazed upon their new sovereign, not with their former admiration, but with a desperate, corrupted loyalty. He was no longer Lucifer, the light-bringer. He was Satan, the adversary, the accuser, the one who stood against. His identity was etched in the searing flames of his rebellion, carved from the very pride that had cast him out. This was his kingdom, born of defiance, fueled by hate. His new identity was solidified, and Satan's ultimate goal now concerned humanity, made in God's image. He stood amidst the burning desolation, no longer Lucifer, but Satan, the adversary. The echoes of God's lament faded, replaced by the roar of the abyss, the groans of his tormented followers, and with them his ultimate declaration: "If I cannot have heaven, then I will have their hearts." The insidious plan began to take form, twisting the very gifts God had bestowed upon his new creation: love, faith, free will. Satan would pervert them all. He would turn human love into doubt, faith into pride, obedience into rebellion. His aim was simple, yet profoundly malicious: to show how easily God's image, humanity, could fall. The abyss roared its ascent, its shadows taking on grotesque forms. Hell was not merely a place, it was an agenda. A new war declared not on heaven, but on creation itself. Not with brute force, but with cunning whispers. He would become the serpent in their garden, the doubt in their minds, the selfish desire in their hearts. The scars of his own fall, still raw, fueled an unending hunger for destruction, for proving himself right, no matter the cost to others. The war was over. Heaven, with a silent, profound effort, began its restoration. Stars that had flickered uncontrollably returned to their ancient courses, their light once more steady and pure. But even in this triumphant return to harmony, a permanent scar remained, a cosmic wound in the memory of eternity. It was the memory of light turning against itself, a sorrowful wisdom etched into the very fabric of existence. The absence of a third of the heavenly host, once glorious, was a constant, stark reminder of the cost of pride. The echoes of God's lament and Lucifer's defiant cry would forever serve as a chilling testament for every created being. The profound theological lesson reverberates through all time. The light that forgets its source becomes its own darkness. Lucifer, once the morning star, consumed by his own chosen fire, stands as the ultimate example of this truth. He was a perfect reflection, but when he chose to worship the reflection rather than the source, his glory twisted into ruin. This timeless story invites us to reflect. What is the nature of true glory? Is it found in self-exaltation, striving for an illusion of independence? Or is it in humble reflection of the divine, in recognizing the true source of all light and life? Perhaps the greatest battle is not in the heavens, but within each of us, to choose humility over pride, love over self-will, and the source over the reflection. For in that choice lies the key to our own light and our destiny.